more testing and more gameplay with Vox Omnium, the brand new Sorcerer staff that opens up the doors for a lot of cool ideas. I decided to cook up a build, so I'm going to show you guys 2 different things that you can do with it, maybe even 3 in this gameplay here. But basically what your goal would be to do is you are going to be casting any core skill that you like. I think Frozen Orb might be one of the best ones because it has the ability to apply vulnerability. But you're going to be shooting out Firebolt, Frostbolt, or Spark. So basically all of the basics except for the Arc Lash can be used. And it's going to shoot out those based on your last 2 non-core skill casts. So the other ones have to basically be things that you would actually want to use. So that means I cannot play Ice Armor and Flame Shield if I want to shoot out Sparks. If I want to play, let's say, Firebolt, which was another thing I was considering, you could not play Ice Armor, you can't play Teleport. And, like, to play a Sorceress build without Teleport, well, I'll be honest, that's probably not going to be very fun. But there's a lot of other things that you can try out, and just for the sake of the video, I'm going to be mixing up a couple different ways to actually play, as we're going to be... Technically, there's another board that we can actually throw in for each one of them. Like, if I was really interested in some sort of dot build, we could throw in Burning Instinct, we could throw in Icefall, but it's pretty similar if we were to run Tactician, which gives us 10x, and then this gets increased. The difference is like another 8x, but it lets me just make the video really quick so you guys can kind of see the performance of this build now that I kind of talk a little bit about it. By the way, it's not going to be like a super S tier build. It's more so a build that I want to say it has maybe more potential later down the line. I'll talk about why it's kind of bad, because you can run a one-handed sword that gives you 300x multiplier on your basics, or you can run a two-handed for 90. It's a no-brainer. This item is destined to fail. I'm going to be honest. Don't play this build. Unless you just like to make cool things and just to try things out. That's what I want to try out with this bet. It's going to be significantly worse in the boss department compared to any build. And the reason why is, unless the boss spawns in things constantly, unless you get the Shaman boss, yeah, it's going to be a really bad experience. But here's kind of what it looks like. And again, we're just using the Frozen Orb for vulnerability. All the damage actually comes from Spark. And, like, you might think, okay, it's not so bad. Well, you try playing Sorceress without Flame Shield and without Ice Armor. Yeah, and there's way better options, obviously. But I think if you really wanted to min-max this, you could probably push Pit like 100 plus. Like, it's possible, but that's because the Crown of Lucian is really OP. And looking at the damage numbers, you guys can see it's kind of what I would say is mediocre. Even hitting for like 500k nowadays is nothing. However, remember, like, the Spark hits so many dang times. Like, it really does hit a huge amount of times. But the problem that I have with this build is, like, there is not enough room to throw on the things that you want. You want to run Moonrise, you want to run Adaptability, and, well, you can't really, because you have to run Pain Gorgers, you got to run the Crown of Lucian. And the main offender here is really that this is a two-hander. There should have been a one-handed item, and the damage should have been, like, at least reasonable. Again, the other one's 300x on a one-hander versus a 90 on a 2. I mean, obviously ours is a perfect roll, but like it's just not there. But I was thinking about, like, obviously adding adaptability would be great if we could fit it in. But the new amulet is just like way too good to skip out on. But as far as the main skill that is again doing our damage, which is Spark, I was kind of curious to see, is there anything for Spark? Let's see if there's anything new with Spark. And well, unfortunately, there's no like cool thing to play around with Spark. So you guys can see kind of the performance. I would say it was very underwhelming, although you can hit a lot of the targets because Frozen Orb obviously is going to activate your Pain Gorgers, and it does add a lot smoother gameplay. But the problem that I see with this build, and I guess the idea was cool, that you can like activate Pain Gorgers for free. But another thing that was really interesting with this build is when you shoot, and I actually just made a video, you can see these little things kind of come out over here. They come out from the side, so what happens a lot of the times, unless you're point blank, you'll just miss the target, which is kind of bad. Now, I want to show you guys ice and fire and talk about like the pros and the cons, and maybe someone can come up with an idea to actually make this good, because I genuinely believe this thing is destined to fail. And so now that you guys have seen some small gameplay, I'm going to swap to a different one, and you guys can see kind of the performance on that. And the reason why I think it's actually really bad is because, again, you have a one-hander, which we could equip, that this gives us up to 300x, and it gives us basic skills, and it gives us basic attack speed, and like this is basically the same thing, except for it doesn't give us like the percent like int that this one gives. And if there was like some other stat that made this like really good, like if it started out with plus like 20 to basic skills, sure, then maybe you could make this like thing viable. But like this has 300x on a one hand. It is like, how can you even compete with this item? This item should have never been created, or it needs some massive buffs, but that's the point of PTR, giving feedback, right? But yeah, the sword just like dunks on this item. So again, this item is basically pointless now that I've kind of like looked into it. But let's go try out some other stuff just so you guys can see the results. So this is a new buff, by the way. I mean, we can gain 1 mana. Let's go, man. Pretty bad. So I was thinking about like, okay, I can try it with ice, right? But remember, again, your whole bar basically needs to be only cold skills, with the exception of your core skill. But I figured the best one was Frozen Orb because we need some source of vulnerability in the build, right? So we opted for that. We can actually probably take this out because it's not really necessary. This will give us more damage actually because of the lock run amulet. But so we're going to try out Frostbolt, and I thought that Frostbolt might have some potential because we can maybe select a different skill. We wanted to run Chain Lightning because it just tags everything, right? Could be another option, so I was like, okay, well, let's go try out this. So again, Frostbolt makes enemies frozen, or I can make myself gain extra mana. It doesn't really matter which one we select, but if you need mana, I happen to have like GA mana on this per second. Because, well, Lucian's going to eat up your mana quite fast. So, remember, we cannot use anything else. That means no teleport. Otherwise, our thing gets really messed up because what happens is, well, we won't get the right ones to shoot out. So, we can see how the performance looks like with the Frostbolt. Now, we're not going to manually cast Frostbolt at all. We're just basically, it's a two button build. And then after this one, I'll show you Fire, and you guys can kind of see maybe what you can do with Fire. I think Fire has a lot of potential because you can group up all the enemies, pierce all of them, and then with, you know, Pain Gorgers, that's a pretty big amount of damage, right? But the first one, it might still have, like, okay, you can see it shooting fire for some reason. And it's going to continue to shoot fire until I activate my ice armor again. And yeah, you can see the performance. It's like, again, it might not look that bad, but when you compare it to, again, other builds that exist, is pretty mediocre. And again, since you're not casting a basic skill, you can't run like Hectic and then get your extra cooldowns. It's just one of those builds where like is severely undertested in terms of like how it was made. When you, again, when you have a sword that has a one-hander that has 300x, it's a mild difference. But there was also the Firebolt variant, and the reason why I thought the Firebolt one would have been kind of cool, and again, you would change up the Paragon for sure. You'd run Icefall, right? You would 100% run this because it's 18x versus this. I just threw this on because it's easy, right? And with Fire, if I was to swap to Fire over here, the performance might be probably the best, but again, still what I would consider mediocre. We could probably swap this enchant for another one. And I was thinking, well, you know, all the basic skills have pretty good lucky hit, right? Why don't we just run like scale into Ball Lightning? But then I realized, oh shoot, well, all the best scalers of your basic ones will clog up your stats because basic skills generally deal way less damage. Therefore, you need to run Pain Gorgers, Adaptability, Moonrise to get good actual damage, right? So you could, in theory, maybe use it just for the lucky hit, and that would maybe be a way to try to make it useful. But again, you're wasting a two-handed. Losing out on the tempering, I think, is just simply too big. Unless you wanted to run another idea that I had with this, which is interesting, is if you were to run this with Andariels, with Gloves of the Illuminator, you may actually have something interesting because you'd have the Bouncing Fireball, which actually has crazy amount of lucky hit chance, combining with getting 2 additional projectiles of something else, which have really high lucky hit already. You could actually maybe make an Andariel's build with this, but again, another problem is you'd want to scale Andariel's, which is much more difficult on the Sorceress versus like the Rogue. So I was just thinking about other things, but anyways, let's go show off the last one that I wanted to show off, which again we'd be using the fire skills, which would just be activating Flame Shield twice, and Flame Shield got a massive nerf. It doesn't activate until its cooldown doesn't start until the ability ends. So this is where you get potentially more damage. It's just really with this. The Firebolt pierces through everything. So if everything is affected by the Pain Gorgers, which it's pretty easy, and if you ran maybe like a Riment of the Infinite Chess Piece, it could be kind of good. But if you need mana or the other one, it doesn't really matter. But I'm just going to show off this one, and I also want to go into the training grounds because I noticed like kind of how it behaves. There's just so many problems with this, to be honest, but I want to do this really quick and then explain why I think that this thing needs some massive buffs, and in the way that it actually shoots. If you notice that it shoots out like okay, there we go, we can just run this now. So this one, like I said, I think it has the most potential. I don't even think we really need to go in the training ground. The thing I wanted to explain with this build, like I said, without being able to activate teleport for damage reduction, without activating your ice armor and stuff, I feel like this build is just simply, like, we have kind of low life, to be honest, with this one. It's because I was originally playing, scaling with DoomBringer. I have a much better, like, build with the Chain Lightning. But, you can actually keep up ice armor because it only is flame armor that was the offender apparently, and you can actually perma ice armor, which is a much better build. This one was just more for something that I wanted to try, and yeah, I mean it can hit for actually quite a bit of damage if you pierce a bunch of enemies, but we would have to redo a lot of the stuff in the Paragon, and I didn't see, at least initially off the start, that it was even worth investing into. Really cool idea in terms of its design, but the damage, unfortunately, I've already mentioned it several times, but like 300 compared to a 90 on a two-hander, crazy that they came out in the same season. It's almost like this item was meant for maybe like a completely different season, and it just came out now, where the other one is just like so much better. And remember, sorceresses can now use the swords, so basically, that's what I wanted to go ahead and show off, is my attempts at playing it. Yes, you could have obviously get your masterworking done, and I think the build would be much better, but I don't think that there is a point for this build to exist. Like, this unit could literally be deleted, and I don't think people would care that much. But it was a really cool concept, so my suggestions, because it's a PTR, and obviously they're not going to just delete the item. I'm just being kind of over-exaggerating by how bad the item actually is. So what could we do to actually improve on this item? So I would say the rest of the rolls could be way, way better. We could have started out with like 10 to basic skills, just like a big number. And then that bonus damage, that like it goes up to 90, I think it could go up way higher. Again, if we are in comparison. Now, it does allow you to have other potential builds, like I mentioned with Andariel. Again, you would just scale a lot more lucky hit, and you could do something. But I was looking at maybe just using the basic skills for some sort of utility, right? Like, could we get any, like, cool utility? And, I mean, like, this thing applies the burn if you didn't want to run the enchantment on the Sorceress, but I don't think that that's worth it to again, sacrifice 200. And we can maybe make the enemies vulnerable, but you could already do that with Frozen Orb. So, again, that's the item. If you guys have any cool ideas with it, let me know, because I think it's a really cool idea for an item, but unfortunately, the stats just, they're not on the same page, man. This is like a Diablo 2 item trying to perform in Diablo 3 numbers. It's not there, man. But anyways, let me know if you guys have any ideas for Vox and Omnium.